Good afternoon and welcome to the public comment meeting. This is the first of the two meetings that we will be conducting today, and we are part of the public comment period, and we'll go over all the details related to not only the programs but also the opportunities for a public meeting period and the public comment period and what the next expected steps are. So to begin, my name is Mukesh Kumar and I work for Waco Metropolitan Planning Organization, and here in this room with me to my left is Arthur Chambers, and in front of me is Nora Roy and Annette Polk, and to my right, Daniela Gallegos. Let's move to the next slide. To access all the material, you can either get them all from our meetings page of our website, or you can also scan this QR code that is in the presentation, and that provides access to all the draft documents as well as these slides. Today, we're going to talk very briefly about who we are as the Metropolitan Planning Organization. We'll also talk about the 2025-2028 Transportation Improvement Program that we are drafting at the moment. And we're also going to talk about Comprehensive Safety Action Plan, which will be on the policy board for their action on April 29th. We'll discuss the public comment opportunities and answer any questions that we have today. So our job at the Metropolitan Planning Organization is to facilitate a regional forum with the expectation of providing local input into the long-term regional transportation decision. We are largely driven by a vision forwarded by the policy board. And according to that vision, as well as the planning factors and the planning emphasis areas, we prioritize the regionally significant projects which have a realistic probability of getting funded. We also did make decisions on how federal highways and transit funds are going to be used within the area. And we also assist local governments as well as TxDOT in identifying what should be prioritized according to the vision, as well as planning factors and the planning emphasis areas. And last but not the least, our most important job really is to guide how the future transportation network needs to look like so that it can function for all users as well as future generations, based on the anticipated need for which we can make decisions today. Next slide. So this is a visualization of our regional planning process, which is largely driven by our 3C goals, which are comprehensive, continuous, and cooperative. And within this, we can see that how we begin with a strategic planning process that identifies the regional vision and goals. We consider the different options, and that's what forms the foundation for our long-range transportation plan, our MTP that evaluates and prioritizes different strategies and develops the transportation plan, which then leads to our short-range transportation improvement program, in which projects are developed, and by that point in time, we know which projects are likely to be funded within the next 4 years, or at least in a very much shorter time frame. Based on that, we also adopt performance target, which then allows us to provide a feedback into how we can revise our strategic planning, the regional vision and values. So this is the feedback loop that gives us a continuous process of regional planning, in which we include all the different modes of transportation, which is what we mean by cooperative, comprehensive, and cooperation among all the regional entities that are associated with any form of mobility decisions in the area. And those are the 3C process we follow, and this is a visualization of what those 3C processes look like. Next slide. Waco MPO covers the entire area of McLennan County, and MPOs are required of all the areas that are above 50,000 in population for their urban area. And in Texas, we have a total of 24 MPOs now, and all 24 of them coordinate and build consensus toward a plan, and in order to fund the transportation projects throughout their planning area. Our planning area is the same as the border of McLennan County. We have a 20-member policy board and a 19-member technical advisory committee, as well as 4 different work groups. But one of the important points to note is that we not only cover all the incorporated cities of 5,000 people or more, but even the smaller cities across the county are represented by 3 different members on the policy board and 2 different members on our technical advisory committee. Next slide. So today we are here to talk about Transportation Improvement Program for 2025 to 2028, as well as Comprehensive Safety Action Plan. And so let's talk about the TIP first. So the phased implementation of improvements to the transportation system that have funding identified through federal and state sources are the ones that we include in our Transportation Improvement Program. It lists each regionally significant improvement which are going to be implemented in the next 4 years. And these projects typically have already been identified and typically are of highest priorities in our long-range transportation plan. These projects are also fully designed, environmentally cleared, and the right-of-way acquisitions are typically in progress or completed preferably. These are all the projects in which we have a realistic forecast that these improvements have been associated with committed state or federal funds, and all 100% of it during the 4-year time frame of each TIP. We do develop it every 2 years with input from the community, and we typically amend them once a year. Next slide. So the TIPs overlap, even though these are 4-year documents, we typically develop them every 2 years. And the previous TIP, prior to the one we are considering right now, covered the years from 2023 to 2026. And this overlap is required because Texas statute imposes a review of projects every 2 years in order to accommodate any delays in construction or implementation, as well as any change in the scope of work or the project limits. And especially if the costs have significantly changed, it gives us an opportunity to revise our TIP document every 2 years. Next slide. And so for this 2025-2028 TIP, the major highway projects for construction that we are going to be included are I-35 4C portion, and that's slated for fiscal year 2025. State Highway 6 on the Twin Bridges reconstruction for FY 2025 as well. Spur 298 is scheduled for FY 2026, and State Highway 6 at McLaughlin is scheduled for 2027. We are removing State Highway 31 at FM 2311 out of the current TIP since it is going to be let for construction in the current fiscal year of 2024. Next slide. Highway projects that we are including for preliminary engineering and right-of-way acquisition, in which the construction is expected to be beyond 2029 or beyond, are State Loop 340 from US 84 to State Loop 484, US 84 between Hewitt State Drive to the project limit of Spur 298, US 84 the Potts Interchange location, as well as McGregor Bypass, and US 317 at Bluebonnet Parkway to Mother Neff Parkway, and the University Parks Drive from US 77 to Garden Drive. These are the projects that will be listed in the current 2025-28 TIP as highway projects that are slated for preliminary engineering and right-of-way acquisitions. Next slide. This is map of all the projects that are identified in our current TIP. Next slide. So in the TIP, we also include the categorical highway projects, which are grouped, and they're grouped because it allows the TxDOT district to higher flexibility in managing these projects for their schedules. And they typically include all the projects that are slated for preventive maintenance rehab, safety, bridge replacement rehab, landscape development, individual projects that are not listed within TIP. And also, those are the types of projects that are typically grouped. And as we mentioned earlier, it provides TxDOT flexibility to use funds on the greatest needs as the needs arise at any given point in time. Next slide. Our TIP also includes public transportation projects. And for us, the urban transit system is the Waco Transit. And all the projects are associated with one of these 5 categories: preventive maintenance, ADA expenses. ADA is American Disabilities Act, operating expenses, short-range planning, as well as passenger amenities. For informational purposes, we do provide some information about rural transportation. However, they are not included as part of our transportation planning process. Next slide. Typically, for most urban transit systems, Federal contribution to preventive maintenance, ADA expenses, short-range planning, and passenger amenities are typically at 80%, and operating expenses are covered at 50%. We are expecting that this is the breakdown that will be applicable to Waco Transit beginning next census year, at which point in time we are expecting to be classified as a large urban area with population of over 200,000. Currently, for preventive maintenance, the total for the TIP year of 2025 to 2028, we have about $6.5 million, ADA expenses at about 1.9 million, operating expenses of 9.8 million, short-range planning of about 750,000, passenger amenities of about 273,000, for a total of $21.3 million for the entire TIP duration. So the public engagement schedule, we began on March 31st, April 29, and you notice that we are already in the comment period. That's primarily because based on the last conversation with TxDOT, all MPOs had to speed up their timeline for the current 2025-2028 TIP, and therefore we sought direction from our technical advisory committee as well as policy board to go ahead and open up the public comment period that began on March 31st. It will end on April 29th. Today, currently, this is the first of the two meetings we will hold on April 9th, that is today. And following this up, we will follow this up with Technical Advisory Committee's review and recommendation on May 2nd of 2024, this year, which is our next upcoming meeting, at which meeting they will review the draft and also the comments that we receive today, as well as throughout the comment period for the rest of the month. And based on those reviews, the TAC is expected to make the recommendation with revision as needed for adoption to the policy board. We will conduct a public hearing and the policy board will take action on May 16th, 2024. Next slide. Now we will move to Comprehensive Safety Action Plan. So let's next slide. So in 2022, we received $560,000 in federal funds in addition to $140,000 in local funds for a total of $700,000 to develop comprehensive safety action plan. Part of the development was to convene a safety action task force, and they have been meeting monthly on first Monday of each month since October. And we have also included in the Safety Action Task Force all the major independent school districts and all the cities. And we have had these meetings, both initial meetings as well as follow-up meetings that have been completed. And we have a concise version drafted of the Comprehensive Safety Action Plan that we expect to present to the policy board at the specially called meeting on April 29, 2024. The extended version of CSAP is going to be at the policy board agenda for June 20th, 2024 for any addition to the concise version of it. Next slide. This is just a preview of what the Comprehensive Safety Action Plan might look like. Our consultant on this project was TJKM, and they have been working on developing this Comprehensive Safety Action Plan with inputs from cities, county, TxDOT, and all the stakeholders. It includes all the crash data and safety analysis, and also proposes safety projects and the countermeasures. And what our expectation is that several cities from the area will apply for implementation grants within the same SS4A grant program. And one of the requirements for the implementation projects is that whatever project is being proposed must be included in a comprehensive safety action plan. Next slide. This is another preview of what each of the chapters might look like. For each of the chapter, we'll have an overview of the area of interest, the crash data breakdown by mode and severity. We are typically far more concerned about fatality and severe injury, and not equally and somewhat, but much less concerned about the property damage only. We look at the crash data from previous 10 years to give us an understanding of what the crash profile looks like. And based on that, we identify the major corridor level analysis, or often the intersections. And based on that, we come up with proposed interventions, largely based on the Federal Highway Administration's proven safety countermeasures. Let's go back to this slide. In this slide, for instance, this identifies a major arterial which runs through the project context and what the limits of this segment are, and identify the exact problems, and based on that identify the profile of it for the collision, and based on that makes the recommendation from the safety countermeasures. Next slide. Several of the countermeasures are listed here, which include everything from speed management, particular interventions to accommodate pedestrian and cyclists into the roadway departure problems, which are often major issues in rural parts of the county intersection problems, which are often result in side swipes, as well as major T-bone severe crashes. And similarly, cross-cutting is another major identified categories for which we try to address the problem. Next slide. So based on that, all of our draft documents are online for review. We also had provided map input for Maptionary so that you could identify all the risky roadway segments as well as intersections. And so for the rest of the month, the public comment opportunities on both the Transportation Improvement Program and the Comprehensive Safety Action Plan are, next slide, please. March 31st to April 29, you can also submit your comments online at the link provided here. This is the noon meeting. On April 9th, we will have another meeting at 5:30 p.m. and we will conduct public hearing during the policy board meeting on April 29th. And that's the day when policy board will take its action to approve or modify our TIP as well as Comprehensive Safety Action Plan. Next slide. For any questions, comments, or ideas, our phone number is 254-750-5650. You can also email us at npo@wacotx.gov. You can also reach out to us on Facebook and LinkedIn. You can make your comment in any language of your preference, and comment form can be accessed from the MPO website in the community engagement section. Thank you. Do we have anyone online? So we'll give it another 10 minutes and see if anyone else wants to join us. Quick question on CSAP. Did they draft anything on land use analysis? So we'll just leave it for the extended version?
Yep.
June. Okay. And same thing for equity? Okay.
Our meeting with them is at 4 today, so we can talk about that.
Yeah, I was just thinking a little more about equity. This morning when I was driving, there was a discussion of healthcare access for, especially for Black women. there's a new book out, and the thought that occurred to me was that in some ways, equity in safety is also going to face the same problem, in which we try to address the inequities that has been there, but unless we improve the overall mobility system itself, we are simultaneously going to be contributing to it. And so based
I just think if cities here are not going to invest more in transit, they should at least invest in a voucher program that would reimburse for Uber or something like that for people to get to doctor's appointments. That's what I think, because
yeah, and in some ways, that might actually be a more reasonable solution, at least, because this morning when I was hearing the program, the thought that kept coming back to me was that more often than not, when we're trying to address equity problem, we're trying to address, should I put it? So a public transit-oriented response to equitable access almost amounts to the same way that we already have almost a non-existent dysfunctional system across the country. And by simply extending a dysfunctional system because it discriminated in the past, I'm not clear how are we making equitable gains. So the same, because this morning when I'm hearing that program on medical access for Black women, I'm just thinking that our medical system has failed Black women for the last 100 years. And now we're trying to make a medical system that is already almost dysfunctional more accessible for what? So it's almost as if we need to reform the entire medical system altogether. By providing access, now it's already broken. And so I'm not seeing the value in.
You could either qualify people through the medical system or you could qualify them through transit. If they already meet the transit stuff, then vouchers could be issued. Or if they meet certain criteria, but that has a way of getting all messed up.
Yeah, yes.
But you could do it by qualifying them for transit and then giving them vouchers to reimburse.
I'm just thinking in my head, but how could we make that part of the comprehensive safety action plan? But we could definitely make that discussion in our MTP, for instance. There is nothing that prevents us from doing that analysis, even in terms of our the background information we are putting together. That 58% of our area is disadvantaged. We already know that. We can superimpose public transit access, bike lane, whatever the most current layers are, and run that analysis and show that, in many ways, the problem with responding to equity challenge is that we are responding to a problem that existed 20 years ago. But we're still not, unless we're consciously, intentionally moving forward with interventions that will also address 20 years in the future, we constantly will end up, what is that saying? Dog chasing its tail. That's what we'll be doing. And so it's almost like, yes, we do want to address the inequity of the past, but by limiting ourselves to that without reforming the system that was responsible for that, we'll always be back to square one. We'll never. It's almost like a planning process in which you complete a planning process, and you started somewhere expecting to go someplace else, but you're actually back to where you were. So. Mr. Edson, welcome. Mr. Edson, could you hear us?
Well, let's see. Yes, sorry.
Wonderful. Yeah. I'm glad you're here. We were actually, you're the only one who had joined online. So at 12:30, we were actually going to close. So what we're doing, what we're doing right now is the comprehensive safety action plan is going to get, so a concise version is what we are going to be adopting at the April 29th meeting of the policy board. And we'll discuss it also during the safety action task force and this Monday, it's coming Monday. What is going on is that we have to have the safety action task force safety action plan in place, fully adopted before April 30th in order for implementation projects to be eligible. And so that's why we decided that, let's go ahead and finish up the draft, and then we'll do all the comprehensive update at the June meeting. So that will give us additional month and a half to expand the CSAP to make sure that everything is included. But at the same time, make sure that even for 2024, cities actually are eligible to move ahead with proposals.
Sounds good. Sorry, I jumped on. Yeah, it was late and everything. And just getting back from another meeting here. So.
Yeah. And I also wanted to ask you, because yesterday I was at the another city council meeting where there was a discussion about the cooperation among city and the ISDs. And one of the questions that came up was, and I was happy that I was there to explain it, that ISDs are often not eligible to directly apply for projects, because quite often the locations of the projects are more often than not in the city's right of ways. And so it will only make sense for the cities to work cooperatively. But one of the things I was going to suggest is if, so for Waco ISD, for instance, it might be helpful for you to go ahead and we can discuss more in the Safety Action Task Force meeting, develop a support letter and some sort of a cooperative agreement on all implementation projects that might be proposed by the city of Waco, that regardless of whether the location is exactly adjacent to a school or not, the reality is that people are using this roadway to make the school trips at least every morning, all 5 days a week, and then picking up the children. And so safety in that sense also ends up affecting the schools, even if we're talking about safety a few blocks away from the school. And so, so that was one of the things that we were thinking that we'll bring it up during the Safety Action Task Force meeting, so that every school district is also sort of like actively participating in these implementation proposals as well.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. Yeah, I can do that and get some more information, and see how we want to deliver that and get that to you.
Yeah, so during the next Safety Action Task Force meeting, I'm expecting that at least 3 of the cities will have some of the projects that they are planning to put up for implementation. And so that should come up during that meeting. And also, what we are going to propose for this year, MPO is going to go ahead and apply for the sign inventory proposal. But the other project that we were considering for another, extending our planning document is by specifically focusing on exact school locations. So even though we are going to be paying attention to that in the current safety action plan, but we're thinking of extending it extensively with the intention that we can get some of, especially for the transportation alternative types of projects, so that we can improve the total trips that are taken to the schools. A lot of them are relatively shorter trips. For longer trips, we can't do much, but the shorter trips, at least, if we could convert them into pedestrian or bicycling trips, that not only helps tremendously with the overall quality of life, with public health outcomes and such, but also improves the aesthetic experience around every school then. That way schools feel like they are protected public spaces that accommodate all different kinds of people. And so that's what we were thinking, that we will probably end up doing that, not for the 2024, but for 2025. Okay. And that will then allow us, in fact, what we're hoping is that, and we can discuss more during the safety action task, so we're hoping that will then prompt more cities to apply for transportation alternative funding also, so that not just the SS4A, but the transportation alternative funds were actually at one point in time called Safe Route to School program. And so in that sense, there is a clear preference for transportation alternative projects that directly link schools. So that way we can prepare every city in the county to prepare for those kinds of projects as well.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Are we correct in understanding that that your position with Waco ISD is federally funded?
That's what they said in the letter through June 30th.
I see. Okay. Yeah, that was one of the things that had come up. The reason why I was bringing it up is because if that were true, then we need to have a separate discussion on it. Because we absolutely, we want the Safety Action Task Force to continue on at least for the next 2 years or so. And so in your case, that was one of the questions we had. So we can even talk offline and separately about it.
Okay, yeah, because June 30th is when the official transition from Gold Star to Waco ISD, but basically I'm in that role right now as we transition and make it to June 30th.
Wonderful, yes. That would be fantastic, because when we learned about it, and that was one of the concerns we had, that we after having you with us for so long, we have to have you for another 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Yes.
Good. So, do you need anything else from me right now, or anything, or?
No. If there is any question or comment you have that we should include to our policy board meeting, just let us know.
Good. I think we're good right now. So.
Okay. Great.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Hey, thank y'all.
Okay. Bye. What's our consensus? Do we want to stop or continue for a bit?
I think we're safe to keep.
Okay, good. Thank you all for being here.